The red shot timer screamed beside my right ear. I did not pull the trigger. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then Wade Carver slapped the score sheet against his thigh and gave the crowd the smile he had been saving all morning. "Disqualified," he announced, "same as last time. She freezes when it matters." There were hospital executives behind the glass, security contractors along the back wall, and my 13-year-old son standing near the exit with both hands wrapped around the straps of his backpack. Every one of them had just watched me raise a loaded pistol, settle the sights, and refuse the shot. Wade reached for my weapon. A woman in a navy suit stepped between us. "Do not touch her firearm," she said. Wade stopped with his hand in the air. The woman was Colonel Hannah Brooks, retired, one of the independent safety evaluators Wade had invited because he thought her presence would make his company look respectable. Until that moment, she had barely looked at me. Now she was staring at the monitor above lane 4. Then she turned to me. "Instructor Navarro," she said quietly, "keep the muzzle down and hold your position." The title hit the room harder than a gunshot. Wade's smile disappeared. On the monitor behind him, something moved in the narrow space beyond my target. A strip of orange fabric, a human shoulder. Someone was standing where Wade had sworn nobody could possibly be. I remember thinking that there are moments when the truth does not enter a room like thunder. Sometimes it appears as one small movement on a screen. And every liar in the room understands it at the same time. But to explain why I was holding that pistol, and why my father-in-law needed everyone to believe I was a coward, I have to go back 4 days. The package arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was trying to open a jar of blackberry jam with my left hand. My right shoulder had been stiff since the rain started. It usually was. 3 surgeries had repaired the joint well enough for daily life, but not well enough to let me forget it. I had learned to sleep with a folded towel under my arm and to reach for coffee cups with my elbow close to my ribs. The package was long, narrow, and too light to contain anything good. Carver Protective Solutions was printed across the return label. My son Owen looked up from the kitchen table. He had one earbud in and a sound editing program open on his laptop. Most kids his age collected shoes or game controllers. Owen collected noises, train brakes, elevator bells, the buzz from bad fluorescent lights. He said ordinary sounds became honest when you listened to them by themselves. "You want me to get that?" he asked. "I can lift an envelope." That is not what I asked. He had inherited that from Daniel. The ability to make concerns sound like a factual correction. I cut the tape with a butter knife. Inside was a red shot timer wrapped in gray foam. The plastic casing had a melted crescent near the battery cover. Daniel had made that mark years earlier by setting it too close to a portable heater during a winter qualification. He had laughed when I told him the timer looked wounded. After he died, Wade took possession of nearly everything stored at the Carver training facility. Daniel's range bag, his old duty belt, the notebook where he wrote terrible jokes in the margins of ammunition counts. I had not seen the timer in 3 years. Under it was a formal invitation to the final selection trial for a hospital security contract. The event would be held at the Carver Range the following Saturday. At the bottom, in Wade's heavy black handwriting, were 7 words. "Bring Owen." His father would have wanted it. A second document was clipped behind the invitation. It was written in softer language, the kind lawyers use when they want a knife to feel like a courtesy. It asked me to surrender any future claim connected to Daniel's memorial shares in the company. In exchange, Wade would place Owen's college fund under Carver management until Owen turned 25. I read the page twice. The fund had never belonged to Wade. Daniel created it before his last deployment using his own insurance and part of his company dividends. Wade had spent 3 years speaking about that money as if it were a favor he allowed us to keep. Owen reached for the timer. I almost pulled it away. Then I saw his face and let him take it. He pressed the side button. The device gave a sharp electronic chirp. Owen recorded it on his phone, played it back, then lowered the volume until the sound became a faint pulse. "Dad used this?" "Yes. Did you sometimes?" He turned the timer over and studied the burn mark. "Grandpa says you do not go to ranges anymore." I folded the legal document along the crease Wade's office had already made. "Your grandfather says many things." Owen waited. He was old enough to recognize an evasion and young enough to believe adults should eventually stop using them. "Are you scared of guns?" he asked. The honest answer was complicated. I was not afraid of guns. I was afraid of what people became when a gun gave them permission to stop thinking. I was afraid of men who treated speed like courage. I was afraid of the half second after a mistake, when everyone in the room knew the bullet could not be called back. But that was not the answer Owen wanted. He wanted to know whether the story Wade told about me was true. The story said I had frozen during the test that killed Daniel. It said I had stood there with a weapon in my hands while my husband went down. It said fear had made me useless. I had never corrected that story in front of Owen. At first he was too young, later I told myself I was protecting him from details. The truth was less noble. I did not trust my own memory of that day enough to fight Wade's version of it. I know when not to touch one, I said. Owen looked back at the waveform on his screen. That is not the same answer. It isn't. The morning of the trial, Owen rode in the passenger seat with the timer resting on his knee. The Carver Range sat outside Richmond, beyond a strip of auto shops and storage buildings where the highway noise thinned into open fields. Daniel and Wade had built the first 2 lanes there when Owen was a baby. Daniel used to come home smelling like dust, gun oil, and the peppermint gum he chewed whenever he was tired. As we turned through the gate, a new sign rose above the parking lot. Carver Protective Solutions, Final Hospital Security Selection. Below it in smaller letters was the value of the contract. $4,800,000. Wade had never mentioned the number. He had also never mentioned the bank representatives standing beside the registration tent or the 2 local news vans angled toward the main building. This is not a family event, Owen said. No, did you know that? No, the answer came out too quickly. Owen glanced at me, but he did not press. He turned the timer in his hands, and the melted mark caught the morning light. Wade spotted us before we reached the entrance. He walked across the lot wearing a charcoal suit instead of range clothes. That told me he did not plan to shoot, he planned to be photographed. His silver hair was trimmed close, his company pin centered perfectly on his lapel. He hugged Owen first, then he looked at me as if I were a scheduling problem. You came, he said. You invited me. I invited my grandson. He placed a hand on Owen's shoulder and guided him toward the cameras. Your father built this place, he said loudly enough for the nearest reporter to hear. Everything we do today is part of his legacy. Owen stiffened. Wade felt it and tightened his grip. I stepped closer. Take your hand off him. Wade smiled without showing teeth. There she is. The reporter turned her microphone toward us. Wade released Owen, then raised his voice just enough to gather the people near the entrance. For anyone who has not met her, this is Elise, Daniel's widow. She spent some time in the army before deciding the structured life was too much for her. I heard a few polite laughs, not cruel yet, just obedient. Wade continued, she is here to sign a family matter and support Owen. She will not be participating in the selection. He said it as if the decision had already been made by someone qualified. A registration clerk held out a clipboard. On top was the waiver surrendering my claim to Daniel's shares. I did not take it. Wade leaned closer. You do not belong on a live range anymore, he said. Do not turn this into another scene. The words landed exactly where he intended. In the space between Daniel's name and my doubt. Then he turned toward the waiting applicants and lifted his voice. The only shot Elise Navarro is known for is the one she was too afraid to take. This time the laughter was not polite. Owen looked at the ground. That was the moment I stopped thinking about Wade. I thought about my son sitting at our kitchen table, asking a simple question I had been too afraid to answer. I thought about how silence changes shape when a child has to carry it for you. What begins as protection can become inheritance. I reached past the waiver and took the second clipboard. The one marked applicant registration. Wade's expression changed. Elise, I signed my name. Then I picked up the red shot timer from Owen's hand and placed it on the table between us. I am not signing away Daniel's shares, I said. Wade looked at the timer, then at the line where I had registered for his trial. For the first time that morning, he was no longer performing for the cameras. He was calculating, and whatever answer he found made him afraid. Wade put 2 fingers over the line where I had signed my name. For a moment, I thought he might tear the page in half. He looked past me instead. The cameras were still pointed in our direction. So were the hospital executives and the representatives from the bank that had financed the expansion of his range. Throwing Daniel's widow out after publicly challenging her would have created the wrong kind of story. Wade removed his hand. Registration closes in 4 minutes, he said. If she wants to embarrass herself, let her. He turned to the clerk. Full applicant protocol, no family accommodations. The clerk hesitated. All stages. A woman's voice came from behind Wade. The rules should be identical for every applicant. Colonel Hannah Brooks stood near the entrance with a slim black folder under one arm. She wore no uniform and displayed no medals, but the room seemed to reorganize around her anyway. Her gray hair was cut close at the jaw. She watched people the way experienced instructors watch loaded weapons. Not with fear, with respect for what carelessness could do. Wade's posture changed by less than an inch. It was enough. Of course, he said, Carver standards apply equally to everyone. Hannah looked at me, then at the red timer on the table. Her attention paused on the melted mark. She said nothing. Wade led the applicants into the briefing room before I could decide whether she recognized the timer or only the kind of damage heat leaves on plastic. Owen started to follow me. Wade blocked him with one arm. Observers stay behind the glass. He stays where I can see him, I said. This is my facility, and he is my son. Hannah opened the door to the observation gallery. He can sit with the hospital delegation, she said. The glass is rated, and he will remain visible from every active lane. Wade gave her the smile he used when obedience was more profitable than argument. Owen took the timer from the registration table and slipped it into his backpack. As he passed me, he whispered, I'm recording the sounds. I almost told him not to, then I remembered that people behave differently when they believe nobody is preserving the moment. Keep your phone behind the glass, I said. He nodded and took his seat. The briefing room smelled like burned coffee and fresh paint. 12 applicants sat in 2 rows beneath a wall-sized logo. Most were former police officers or military contractors. 2 wore shirts tight enough to display every hour they had spent in a gym. I wore a plain black jacket over an old gray shirt. Wade stood beside a projection screen. The selected team will provide armed security across 5 hospitals, 3 outpatient centers, and 1 pediatric trauma facility, he said. This is not nightclub work, it is not ceremonial guard duty. Every candidate will be tested on accuracy, judgment, movement, and response under stress. The words were sensible. That was one of Wade's talents. He could place a sensible sentence in front of an irresponsible decision and make the second one harder to see. He introduced the evaluation panel, a hospital risk officer. A former state police captain, Hannah Brooks, who had spent the last 7 years designing use of force standards for medical facilities. Wade saved her introduction for last. Colonel Brooks agreed to observe our final phase and verify that Carver Protective Solutions meets the highest professional standards. Hannah did not smile. I agreed to evaluate the process, she corrected. A quiet tension moved across Wade's jaw. Behind him, the projected schedule listed 4 stages. The final line caught my attention. Judgment course. Lane 4, a young range technician near the rear wall raised his hand. Wade ignored him. The technician stood anyway. He could not have been older than 23. He wore an orange maintenance shirt with the name Malik stitched over the pocket. Sir, Lane 4's rear sensor was still throwing faults this morning. Wade did not turn around. It passed the reset. It passed a soft reset. I have not completed the physical check behind the carrier. Several applicants looked back at Malik. Wade finally faced him. Are you telling this room the range is unsafe? Malik glanced at the hospital delegation. No, sir, I'm saying I need 10 more minutes before I sign it clear. You were given 3 days. The replacement part arrived last night. Wade stepped closer until Malik had to lift his chin to maintain eye contact. You are a range assistant, not an evaluator. Complete your work without interrupting my briefing again. Malik lowered his hand. Yes, sir. As he left, I noticed an orange roll of marking tape clipped to his belt. On military ranges, colors mattered. Red closed a lane. Green cleared it. Orange usually belonged to maintenance crews because it stood out against concrete and steel. Wade advanced the projection. A photograph of Daniel appeared on the screen. He was wearing range glasses and smiling at something outside the frame. My lungs forgot their rhythm. This facility exists because my son believed armed professionals could be trained to make difficult decisions, Wade said. Daniel did not hesitate when lives were at stake. The room was silent. Wade looked directly at me. Not everyone can say the same. My shoulder tightened beneath my jacket. I did not answer. Hannah closed her folder. Is the photograph relevant to the scoring protocol? The question was polite enough to be mistaken for courtesy. Wade clicked to the next slide. No, Colonel, then proceed. The first stage was basic accuracy. Candidates fired from 7 yards, 15 yards, and 25 yards. The minimum score was generous. Wade did not need the test to identify a great shooter. He needed it to eliminate anyone who might embarrass the company later. When my turn came, Dean Mercer, Wade's operations director and the range officer of record, handed me a pistol from the equipment table. His initials were required on every live-fire checklist before a lane went hot. I checked the chamber, magazine, sights, and serial number. The grip was too large for my hand. I had used similar models before, but Wade knew I preferred a narrower frame. Whether he selected it deliberately did not matter. A professional does not require comfort to operate safely. I stepped to the line. Through the glass, Owen lifted his phone. The first 5 rounds went through the center mass scoring zone. On the 6th, pain flashed through my right shoulder and down to my thumb. The muzzle dipped during recovery. The round landed 2 inches outside the group. Wade laughed behind me. It was not loud. He wanted the microphones to hear it without making him appear cruel. I adjusted my stance, bringing my right elbow closer to my side and shifting more support into my left hand. The next 4 rounds tightened again. My final score cleared the requirement by 11 points. It was not exceptional. 3 years earlier, I would have hated that. That morning I accepted it for what it was, proof that my body had changed without becoming useless. Wade circled the stray round on my target with a black marker. For the record, he said, the candidate demonstrates inconsistent recoil control. The state police captain looked at the rest of the group. She passed. Barely. Hannah studied my target. No, she said. She identified a physical limitation, adjusted her technique, and restored control. That is the purpose of a baseline test. Wade capped the marker harder than necessary. The next stage measured movement through a mock hospital corridor. I was slower than the youngest applicants. My shoulder limited how far I could extend around the left side of a doorway, so I changed angles rather than forcing the joint. I did not win the stage. I did not need to. I maintained muzzle discipline around every cardboard patient, every nurse silhouette, and every doorway where an innocent person might appear. One applicant completed the course 9 seconds faster than I did. He also swept the cardboard figure of a child with the barrel of his pistol. Wade praised his speed. Hannah wrote something in her folder. By noon, the bank representatives had arrived inside the observation gallery. Wade checked his watch more often. A man in a blue suit pulled him aside near the vending machines. Their conversation was quiet, but the building had hard concrete walls. Voices traveled. The $1,900,000 extension expires Friday, the man said. Payroll clears Monday. The contract vote is today. Only if the panel signs, they will sign. Wade noticed me at the water fountain. The conversation ended. He walked over and lowered his voice. You have proven you can still stand on a line. Take the courtesy and leave. I haven't completed the test. You already failed the part that matters. I thought Carver standards applied equally. His eyes moved toward Hannah. You think she is protecting you? I think she is taking notes. His face hardened. He reached inside his jacket and removed the document surrendering my claim to Daniel's shares. Sign this before the judgment course, and I will record your withdrawal as voluntary. Owen's fund remains untouched, and if I do not, I document the result honestly, meaning that the widow of Daniel Carver entered an armed evaluation against professional advice and displayed impaired judgment connected to unresolved trauma. There it was, not concern architecture. Wade did not need me to fail every stage. He needed one official incident he could attach to the story he had told for 3 years. Once it existed on company letterhead, he could use it in court, in the management of Owen's fund, and anywhere else my signature stood between him and Daniel's shares. I folded the document once and handed it back. You should have asked me to sign before you explained the threat. Wade's smile returned. I didn't threaten you. I offered you a way out. The judgment course began after lunch. Lane 4 was separated from the observation area by thick ballistic glass. A motorized carrier held a paper threat target 20 yards downrange. The exercise was simple. When the target turned, the applicant had to assess the image and decide whether to fire. Some targets carried weapons, some carried phones. One held a child. The test measured judgment, not speed, but Wade had placed a large digital timer above the lane where every applicant could see it. That was his version of pressure. Give people a rule, then surround it with reasons to violate the rule. I waited outside while the candidate before me completed his run. Malik emerged through the side maintenance door. Sweat darkened the collar of his orange shirt. He carried a small tool case and the roll of orange tape. "Did you clear it?" I asked. His eyes shifted toward the control booth. "I reset the carrier, that was not my question." Before he could answer, Wade called from behind us. "Malik, the rear target is drifting." Malik looked downrange. "I need to check the limit switch." "Then check it." "Sir, the lane has to remain cold." "It is cold, the next candidate is already staged." Wade looked at me. "She is not on the line yet." Malik entered through the side door and disappeared along the narrow service passage beside the lane. A few seconds later, I heard the maintenance latch close. "Not lock, close." Dean handed me hearing protection and a loaded magazine. I did not take the magazine. "Is the lane clear?" Dean looked toward Wade. Wade gave the smallest nod. Dean entered his operator code into the control panel. "Clear," Dean said. "Did Malik exit? He is behind the barrier." "That is not the same thing." Wade stepped into the staging area. "This is a closed ballistic system. The service passage is isolated from the firing lane." "Then why does your protocol require visual confirmation before the lane goes hot?" Dean looked at the blank inspection binder, then at the operator code glowing on the control panel. Wade's voice sharpened. "Because protocols are written to account for people who follow instructions." I looked through the glass at Owen. He had one earbud pressed against his ear. His phone was angled toward the lane. He was listening to the building, the way he listened to train brakes and elevator bells. He raised his hand, not waving, trying to get my attention. Then I heard it, a metallic click behind the backstop. Followed by a second sound, the soft pull of tape tearing from a roll. I turned to the range officer. "Call Malik on the intercom." "Wade's patience broke. You are stalling. Call him." "You heard Dean. The lane is clear." Hannah appeared at the edge of the staging area. "Is there a problem?" Wade answered before I could. "She is manufacturing one." He took the red shot timer from Owen's backpack, where it had been resting beneath the chair. He turned the melted crescent toward me before placing it in Dean's hand. "Use this. Maybe a familiar sound will help her focus." Dean clipped it near my right shoulder without checking the intercom. Wade watched the timer, not the lane. I inserted the magazine chambered around and kept the muzzle pointed toward the floor. "Final confirmation," I said. "Is the range clear?" Wade looked through the observation glass at the bank representatives. Then at the hospital panel. "Yes." The lights dimmed. The motor carried the target downrange. For a second, only the white back of the paper was visible. Then the timer screamed. The target snapped toward me. A man in a black jacket, a handgun in his right hand. My pistol came up. The front sight settled over the center of his chest. Every person behind the glass expected the shot. My finger moved from the frame toward the trigger. Then something shifted in the gap beside the target. A thread of orange, not on the paper, behind it. My focus moved past the silhouette. Orange fabric appeared for less than half a second, near the edge of the service opening. A shoulder, a person leaning into the carrier mechanism. "Malik." I kept my finger straight. The digital clock continued running. 1 second, 2, 3. Wade slapped the control panel. "What are you waiting for?" The threat target remained facing me. I could hear Owen's recording phone pressed against the glass. I could hear the ventilation system. I could hear my own pulse beneath the hearing protection. I could also hear the faint scrape of Malik's tool case behind the target. I lowered the muzzle. The target rotated away. The red timer stopped. Wade did not wait for anyone else to speak. Disqualified. The door behind the observation gallery opened. Executives, applicants, and cameras began moving toward the lane. Wade stepped through first, holding the score sheet like a verdict. "Same as last time," he announced. "She freezes when it matters." He reached for the pistol in my hand. Hannah moved between us. "Do not touch her firearm." Wade stopped. Hannah looked past me at the lane monitor. "Instructor Navarro," she said, "keep the muzzle down and hold your position." The title silenced the people closest to us. On the screen, the recording advanced frame by frame. White target, black jacket, printed gun, then a strip of orange appeared behind the paper. Hannah pointed at the monitor. "Freeze that image." Dean froze the image. The next frame showed Malik's shoulder inside the space Wade had declared clear. Hannah turned toward the control booth. "Who authorized lane 4 to go hot?" Nobody answered. Wade was still holding the score sheet. But it no longer looked like a verdict. It looked like evidence. Hannah kept one finger on the frozen frame. Who authorized lane 4 to go hot? Dean swallowed. I entered the operator clearance. On whose authority? Hannah asked. Wade answered for him. I authorized it based on the clearance report. There was no clearance report, Malik said. He had stepped out from the maintenance passage with a wrench still in one hand. The orange tape on his shoulder was the same strip visible on the monitor. Wade turned slowly. You told me the reset was complete. I told you the carrier moved after the reset. I never signed the lane clear. The hospital risk officer looked toward the control desk. Is there a signed inspection? Dean opened the binder, flipped through 3 pages, and stopped. The page for lane 4 was blank. His operator code was still visible on the control panel behind him. Wade's face did not collapse. Men like Wade rarely give you the satisfaction of watching the mask fall all at once. His expression simply became more careful. This was a communication failure, he said. No one was injured. Hannah looked at the pistol still pointed safely toward the floor. No one was injured because she did not fire. The state police captain asked me to unload. I removed the magazine, locked the slide to the rear, and handed the weapon to the range officer Grip first. Only then did Hannah face the observers. 3 years ago, the Army's Protective Services program revised part of its shoot or no-shoot instructor package after a civilian contractor was nearly killed during a poorly cleared simulation. The review team included Sergeant First Class Elise Navarro. The room changed around my name, not dramatically. There were no gasps, no one saluted. The applicants simply stopped looking at me like a widow who had wandered onto a range. They looked at the monitor again and understood that the delay they had mistaken for fear had a history. Hannah continued. Her written recommendation was simple. A target is not the end of a bullet's responsibility. Wade gave a short laugh. She has not served in 3 years. Judgment does not expire because a uniform is in a closet. He stepped closer to Hannah. This is my evaluation. No, she said, it is the hospital's evaluation conducted at your facility. The distinction landed where the cameras could hear it. Owen came through the gallery door after the range officer declared the line cold. He stopped beside me and held up his phone. I recorded the maintenance latch, he said. It closes at 11 seconds, the timer starts at 14. Wade looked at him. You should not have been recording. Owen moved closer to my side. You told the reporters this was a public demonstration. For the first time that day, Wade had no answer prepared for his grandson. The hospital panel suspended the shooting portion of the trial pending review. That should have ended the event. Wade could not afford to let it end. He checked the bank representatives near the gallery and asked for 10 minutes to reorganize. Then he gathered the panel in the briefing room and spoke through the glass wall, where the cameras could still see him. I could not hear every word, but I recognized the movements. The open palms, the small nod toward Daniel's photograph. The careful placement of blame on a junior employee without saying Malik's name. 5 minutes later, the hospital risk officer returned. The live fire stage remains suspended, she announced. The panel will continue with the equipment certification demonstration while the lane incident is reviewed. Hannah did not look pleased, neither did Malik. Wade did. He had lost control of the range, so he moved the contest to a room he believed he still controlled. The ballistic demonstration took place in a separate testing bay behind the main building. The walls were reinforced concrete. A remote-mounted rifle faced a block of calibrated clay 20 feet away. In front of the clay stood a torso-shaped frame wearing a black protective vest. A woman in safety glasses waited beside the equipment table. She introduced herself as Dr. Priya Shah, an independent materials consultant retained by the hospital. Wade spoke before she finished. What you are about to see is Carver Shield 7 armor. It exceeds the hospital's requirement for armed response teams and has already been tested by our internal quality department. Priya touched the vest label with one gloved finger. I have not reviewed your internal report. You received the certification packet. I received a certification packet. That is not the same thing. Hannah looked at me. The corner of her mouth almost moved. Wade ignored both of them. He explained the plate would be struck once, under controlled conditions. The round was appropriate to the rating. The clay behind the vest would measure deformation. I watched his hands. He kept flexing the fingers of his left hand, then smoothing them against his trouser seam. Daniel used to do the same thing before telling his father something he knew Wade would reject. The first plate was mounted. Priya scanned the serial number. Wade stopped beside the firing control. What now? The serial on the plate does not match the serial listed in your packet. It is the same production run, then the run number should match. Wade picked up the clipboard and examined it. A clerical error. Priya photographed the label. Clerical errors are why independent testing exists. A technician replaced the plate with another from a sealed carton. This serial matched. The remote rifle fired, the sound struck the concrete and came back flat. The vest jumped against the clay. Fine black dust drifted from the lower edge of the plate. Priya waited for the ventilation fan, then approached. She pressed the surface with both thumbs. A crack ran from the impact point toward the corner. That should not be visible from the strike face, she said. Wade moved beside her. The plate stopped the round. Priya removed the vest and inspected the back. The clay had formed a deep crater. Stopping penetration is not the only requirement. Excessive deformation can kill the person wearing it. She looked at the technician. Bag the plate. Do not return it to the company carton. Wade's voice tightened. You are drawing a conclusion from one damaged sample. I am preserving one damaged sample. A small piece of backing material had separated near the lower seam. Priya picked it up with forceps. On the inside was a faded white stamp. My stomach turned before my mind understood why. I had seen that stamp once before. Not in a report, on Daniel's kitchen table 2 nights before he died. He had brought home a plate wrapped in brown paper and told me Wade wanted him to evaluate a cheaper supplier. The stamp had been half obscured by resin, but Daniel had traced it with his thumbnail while we argued. I stepped closer. Priya noticed. You recognize this marking? Wade moved between us. She recognizes trauma wherever she looks. Hannah's head turned toward him. I kept my eyes on the fragment. There should be 4 letters before the lot number, I said. The first 2 are hidden under the adhesive. Priya tilted it toward the light. C&M. My mouth went dry. Cedar Meridian. Wade laughed again, but this time the sound came too quickly. That company has supplied half the industry. No, Priya said. Cedar Meridian lost its certification after a resin substitution case 4 years ago. 4 years. Daniel died 3 years ago. The test bay became very quiet. Wade stepped toward the equipment table. These plates were purchased through a licensed distributor. Priya placed the fragment into an evidence pouch. Then your distributor will have chain of custody documents. Hannah looked at me. What happened to your husband? Wade answered before I could. He died in an accidental test after my daughter-in-law failed to follow a safety command. The sentence was familiar. I had heard versions of it at the funeral, in the insurance meeting, and once through a bathroom door while Owen sat on the other side trying not to cry. My shoulder began to ache in a way that had nothing to do with rain. I left the test bay. The hallway outside was colder. I pressed my palm against the concrete wall and counted the seams between the panels. 1, 2, 3. The old habit slowed my breathing, but it did not quiet the memory. Daniel standing in our kitchen with the brown-wrapped plate. His voice low because Owen was asleep. Dad says the new supplier is temporary. My answer, temporary is how permanent mistakes get introduced. Then Daniel telling me the test would be controlled. Me saying I would not sign the safety sheet. The next day, I received a call that he had been injured. By the time I reached the private range, the plate had been removed. Wade told investigators Daniel had insisted on testing it himself. He said I had been present earlier, became emotionally unstable, and failed to issue a clear stop order. There had been no official charge against me. There did not need to be. A story repeated by a grieving father became easier for everyone to accept than a complicated failure involving purchasing records, insurance, and a dead son who could no longer contradict him. The hallway door opened. Wade stepped out and let it close behind him. You are going home, he said. No, the hospital suspended the shooting test. You made your point. This stopped being about the shooting test when that plate cracked. His face hardened. You do not know what you saw. I know the supplier, Mark. You saw one sample 4 years ago while Daniel was reviewing vendors. That does not make you an expert in materials, no. It makes me a witness. He came closer. You signed a confidentiality agreement after Daniel's accident. I signed an agreement covering company training procedures. It does not require me to lie about a defective plate. You think anyone will believe your interpretation over the accident report? I haven't interpreted anything. I looked through the glass in the door. Priya was sealing the plate fragment. Hannah was speaking to the hospital risk officer. Malik stood near the wall with his arms crossed, watching Wade. I just stayed in the room, Wade lowered his voice. If you continue this, Owen's fund will be frozen before the end of the week. The company will petition for control based on your instability, and I will submit today's footage as evidence that you entered an armed trial while emotionally compromised. You mean the footage showing I saved your employee? I mean the score sheet showing you refused a lawful command. The range was not clear, details can be argued. There it was again, the foundation of his entire life. Facts were not things that happened. They were details to be argued until the person with less money became tired. He removed his fountain pen and held it out with the waiver. Sign, walk away, Owen keeps his future. For 3 years that offer would have worked. Not because I believed Wade. Because every time he threatened Owen's future, I saw Daniel on the floor of that private range, and heard myself wondering whether one stronger sentence from me could have kept him alive. I took the paper. Wade's shoulders loosened. Then I tore it once through the signature line. The sound was small, his eyes changed. You have no idea what you are destroying. I finally do. I let the pieces fall into his hand and returned to the test bay. Priya had placed the failed plate beside a laptop. On the screen was a magnified image of the inner material. The fiber orientation is wrong for the listed specification, she said. I need the purchase records and the remaining plates isolated. Wade entered behind me. You do not have authority to seize company property. The hospital risk officer raised her phone. Our contract gives us authority to suspend and preserve any equipment submitted for certification. We do not have a contract yet, then consider this a condition of continuing the evaluation. A technician rolled 3 sealed cartons away from Wade. Wade's hand closed over the company pin on his lapel as his eyes followed the cartons. The bank representative in the blue suit stepped into the doorway. Wade, we need to speak. Later. The $1,900,000 extension is contingent on the hospital award. I said later. The man glanced at the evidence bags and left. Wade looked from the sealed cartons to the unsigned hospital contract visible through the glass. His fingers stayed locked around the pin. Without the award, the extension would disappear. Without the extension, payroll would clear once and the company would default on Friday. Hannah opened her black folder. Dr. Shah, is there a way to identify when these plates were purchased? If the serials are genuine, yes, and if they are not, then the adhesive, resin batch and label stock can still narrow the period. Wade looked at her. What exactly are you suggesting? Hannah did not answer him. She looked at me. Do you still have any document from Daniel's accident? No, Wade's attorneys collected the company copies. The insurer sealed the rest after settlement. A voice came from the back of the room. I have something. Malik stepped forward. Wade turned. You have nothing. Malik held up his employee tablet. The internal inventory app mirrors deleted inspections for 30 days. I found the lane 4 clearance Wade said existed. He tapped the screen. There is no signed clearance. But there is an override from Wade's administrator account at 10:42 this morning. Dean Mercer's operator code accepted it at 10:43 and placed lane 4 in ready status. The hospital risk officer took the tablet, Malik continued. And when I searched the armor serials, I found archived entries from the accident inventory 3 years ago. Same lot prefix. Wade's hand closed around his fountain pen. You accessed records outside your assignment. You told everyone I failed to clear the lane. You did fail. No, sir, you overrode it. The words, sir, sounded different now. Not respectful. Final. Priya entered the lot prefix into her laptop. A record appeared from the insurance archive index. Most of the file was restricted, but the metadata remained visible. Beneath it, the current inventory index expanded 1 line at a time. 216 plates, 12 client sites, 4 purchase orders. 40% below market price. The oldest shipment was dated 3 years and 11 months earlier. Then the archived incident entry appeared. Test incident. Fatality, Daniel Carver. My knees almost gave way. I caught the edge of the table. Owen moved beside me before anyone else noticed. He did not touch my shoulder. He knew better. He simply stood close enough that I could feel the heat of him through my sleeve. Priya read the screen. The plate submitted in Daniel Carver's accident was logged as destroyed after examination. Wade spoke quickly. It was. She turned the failed sample over. Then why does this serial number indicate it was returned to active inventory 11 months later? No one looked at me. They all looked at Wade. He stared at the screen as if the numbers had betrayed him personally. Hannah asked the hospital counsel to contact the insurer and request emergency release of the sealed materials based on evidence of continuing public risk. Wade found his voice. You cannot reopen a settled accident because of a database error. The hospital counsel replied from the doorway, we are not reopening it. We are reporting a new safety failure involving the same production lot. The insurer decides what follows. She photographed the failed serial, the blank clearance page, Dean's operator acceptance, and Wade's administrator override. Then she sent an emergency preservation notice to the insurer, the state licensing board, and the Attorney General's Consumer Fraud Intake Unit. Because the notice tied a new public safety failure to the same production lot involved in a prior fatality, the insurer's protocol authorized an immediate archive hold and counsel review. Wade looked at me, his jaw locked, the fountain pen bent slightly between his fingers. He had spent years building a version of Daniel's death that required my silence. He had never imagined the thing that broke it open would be one bullet I refused to fire. 2 hours later, the insurer's counsel joined by secure video. The testing bay had become an evidence room. Every submitted plate was sealed. Malik's tablet was mirrored. Owen's audio file and the lane footage were copied under witness. Wade sat at one end of the conference table with his attorney. I sat at the other with Owen. Priya presented the fracture findings first. She explained that the failed sample contained substituted resin and backing material inconsistent with its label. She confirmed the lot prefix matched the archived accident record. Hannah presented the range footage. She did not praise me. She did not need to. She showed the blank clearance page, Dean's operator acceptance, Wade's administrator override, the orange shoulder behind the target, and the 3 seconds during which my finger remained outside the trigger guard. Then the insurer's counsel opened a recovered audio statement recorded by Daniel 48 hours before the accident. Wade stood. That file was excluded from the settlement. Sit down, his attorney whispered. The counsel continued. The exclusion was based on a claim that the statement concerned a hypothetical purchasing disagreement. Today's material suggests it concerns an active safety issue. The speaker crackled. Daniel's voice entered the room. It was younger than I remembered, or maybe grief had made every memory of him sound tired. The cedar meridian plates arrived without complete certification. Elise Navarro refused to sign the evaluation sheet, so I am assuming responsibility for tomorrow's test. My father approved the vendor after a preliminary sample failed the drop inspection. I am recording this to preserve the purchasing sequence and her objection on file. The statement ended, no music, no dramatic confession. Just the low hum of the conference room ventilation and Owen trying not to breathe too loudly. The statement did not tell me what Daniel had felt before the test. It established only 3 things. Wade knew about the failed sample. Daniel chose to proceed, and my objection had been removed from the approval chain. The insurer's counsel displayed 3 emails recovered from an archived purchasing account. The first warned that Cedar Meridian's certification was under review. The second offered the plates at 40% below market price. The third came from Wade. Proceed. Remove Elise Navarro from the approval chain. Wade's attorney closed his eyes. The hospital risk officer removed the unsigned contract from her folder. She did not tear it. She placed it face down. That was worse. Wade looked at me across the table. You turned my son against me. I did not answer. Daniel had already answered for himself. The hospital risk officer slid the unsigned contract into a red evidence folder. Carver Protective Solutions is removed from consideration effective immediately, she said. We are also notifying the state licensing board, the hospital insurer, and every facility currently using equipment from the affected lots. Wade's attorney placed a hand on his sleeve. Wade shook it off. You cannot destroy a company employing 86 people because of one supplier dispute. Priya closed her laptop. This is not a supplier dispute. It is a mislabeled ballistic product submitted for independent certification after a prior fatality involving the same lot. Hannah added, and an active firing lane was overridden while a technician remained behind the target. The bank representative stepped back into the room. He did not sit. Our credit committee is suspending the extension pending the safety and fraud reviews. Wade stared at him. You said Friday. I said Friday if the hospital award was approved. Wade looked from the bank representative to the hospital counsel, then to Hannah. He opened his mouth, no one moved, he closed it again. Then he looked at Owen. Your father built this company for you. Owen's fingers tightened around mine. No, he said. Dad built things because he thought they should protect people. Wade flinched more at that than he had at any document. His attorney requested a private conference. The hospital counsel refused until the submitted plates, company server mirror, lane footage, and employee devices were formally preserved. Nobody accused Wade of murder, nobody needed to. The facts were serious enough without decorating them. By 5:30 that afternoon, the state licensing board had placed Wade's firearms instruction credential under emergency review and suspended Dean Mercer's range safety certification. The county prosecutor opened a reckless endangerment review into Dean's decision to accept an unsigned override and activate an occupied lane. The insurer reopened Daniel's accident file. The hospital referred the armor records to the State Attorney General's Consumer Fraud Unit for review of product mislabeling, records falsification, and consumer fraud. Before sunset, 12 client sites had quarantined 216 Carver Shield 7 plates. The bank froze the $1,900,000 extension. The hospital formally withdrew the $4,800,000 award. No criminal charge had been filed yet. Wade was not dragged away in handcuffs. Real consequences rarely arrive with that kind of choreography. They arrive as access cards that stop working, contracts that are no longer returned. Lawyers who begin using your full name. Employees who realize their loyalty has been funding your protection rather than their future. Malik gave his statement before sunset. Dean gave his statement after Malik, with an attorney beside him. He admitted that Wade had ordered the override, but he had accepted it, entered his code, and placed the occupied lane in ready status. Neither man looked at Wade when they left. I signed only one document that day. It was a preservation acknowledgement confirming that Owen's audio file had been copied without altering the original. The fountain pen Wade offered me remained on the conference table. Outside, the late afternoon had turned cold. News crews waited beyond the gate, but Hannah arranged for Owen and me to leave through the staff lot. Wade found us before we reached the car. His suit jacket was open. His tie had shifted to one side. It was the first time I had ever seen him look unfinished. Elise, I unlocked the passenger door for Owen. Get in. Owen hesitated, then obeyed. Wade stopped a few feet away. You cannot keep him from me. I am not discussing custody in a parking lot. I am his grandfather. You used his father's death to threaten his mother. I was trying to save what Daniel built. You were trying to save what you controlled. His face had tightened. You think you are better than me because you refused one shot? No, I looked back at the range building. Workers were sealing the testing bay. Daniel's photograph still hung inside, smiling over a company that had used his face long after it stopped honoring his judgment. I think I should have stopped letting you tell Owen what that shot meant. Wade's voice dropped. If the company fails, his shares are worthless. Then they are worthless. He stared at me. For years he had believed money was the final argument because everyone eventually became afraid of losing it. I had been afraid too, just not anymore. You may contact Owen through me, I said. No private visits, no discussions about the case. No telling him his father would be ashamed of either of us. If you violate that once, contact stops until a court says otherwise. You cannot set conditions on family. That is exactly where conditions belong. I got into the car. Wade stood behind us as we drove away, smaller in the mirror each time the road curved. That night, Owen and I sat at the kitchen table with the lights off except for the lamp above the stove. The insurer's counsel had sent me a second audio file. During the archive hold, counsel found it attached to Daniel's safety statement. The final portion had been separated from the legal review because it was personal and addressed to me, so counsel released a copy after the preservation conference. For 3 years, nobody had thought it mattered. Owen placed the red shot timer between us. Do you want me to play it? He asked. I nodded. Daniel's voice filled the kitchen again. This time there were no lot numbers or supplier names. Elise, if you ever hear this, then I ignored you again. A chair creaked on the recording. I could picture him leaning forward, elbows on his knees. You were right about the plates. You were right to refuse the signature. Dad keeps calling it fear because he does not know what to do with caution when it comes from someone he cannot control. I covered my mouth. Owen did not look away from the phone. Daniel continued, if tomorrow goes wrong, do not let anybody say you failed to stop me. You did. I made the decision to go because I thought I could prove the problem and protect everyone at once. He paused. I know that is the kind of sentence men use when they want recklessness to sound noble. A broken laugh came through the speaker, then his voice softened. Tell Owen courage is not pulling a trigger because people are watching. Courage is knowing what happens after you do. The file ended with a quiet click. For a long time, neither of us moved. I had imagined relief as something warm. It was not, it hurt. Guilt had lived inside me for 3 years. Even after the truth arrived, it did not leave politely. It pulled at everything it had attached itself to on the way out. Owen reached for the timer. Was Grandpa there when Dad recorded that? I do not know. Do you think he ever heard it? Maybe part of it. Owen turned the timer over. His thumb rested on the melted crescent. Are you going to forgive him? The question was not about Daniel. No, I said, not now, ever, I do not know. He accepted that answer because it was finally an honest one. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. You can still love your grandfather, I said, but loving someone does not require you to believe every story they tell about you. Owen looked at the timer, then he pressed the reset button. The display returned to 0. A small electronic chirp crossed the kitchen. The same sound Wade had tried to use as a weapon, now it marked nothing except a beginning. For years, I thought revenge would feel like Wade losing his company, his contract, or the authority he used to make people doubt themselves. I was wrong. The deepest revenge was quieter. It was my son hearing the truth before the lie became part of his own voice. It was Daniel's memory no longer belonging to the man who spoke the loudest. If someone in your life has ever called caution weakness because it stood between them and what they wanted, share this story with them. They may need the reminder that refusing an irreversible mistake is not cowardice. And it was me understanding that the bravest shot of my life was the one I had enough discipline not